Iman Gadzhi, the man, the myth, the legend. Absolute honor to have you here. You know, like I was telling you before we hit record, have been following your story, your journey in and out for the past, I don't know, 5, 6 years. So I've been very familiar with you, and I'm extremely grateful for you being here today.
Oh man, thanks for having me. And yeah, it was quite interesting. We were talking off camera. I think if you tracked like our YouTube recommended subscription box for the last 6 years, or linearly, I'll probably all have the exact same stuff for the last 6 years.
Yeah. So before we get into all that and the progression, which I do want to talk about, I first want to ask about Brixton Bookmongers. What's that all about?
So Brixton Bookmongers, yeah, you did your research, huh? Brixton Bookmongers was my favorite bookshop in London because you would get places like Waterstones, which I would hang out at quite often actually, but would never buy a book from there because it was like 12, 13 pounds to buy a book. It's like, but like $15. And then you could go to Brixton Bookmongers, and I would actually like do all these calculations in my head. So back when I was before that, I think the age of 17 in London, you have like something called an Oyster card. So like that's how you like get around your travel card. So like it would be free on the bus. So I would either take the bus, or if I was feeling a little generous to myself, I'd take the tube. It was a lot quicker, but you'd still get like 50% off. So it would cost me whatever, like a pound to get there. And then rather than spending £15 on one book at Brixton Bookmongers, because it was a used bookstore, you get 3, 4, sometimes even 5 books for that price. And yeah, it was, at that time when I was going between 2014, 2017, I was reading, or I'd say late 2016, I was reading a book a week. So yeah, that was pretty convenient for me. It was a little bit more economical.
What types of books were you looking for around that time?
Man, a bit of everything. Like, the 2014 when I first started reading, of course, it's like, your usual Rich Dad, Poor Dad, your Think and Grow Rich. But very quickly I got into some more like esoteric books. When I was 14, I think it was 14 or maybe 15, Red Wave Superior Man. That book, obviously, I think has shaped a lot of young men. Read books like The Kabbalion, read books like, it's quite like weird books for like a 14, 15-year-old to be reading, like, 5 love languages, just a sort of very wide, like, spectrum and a lot of stuff. Because I was like, I think, like I was 14, 15, and I knew I didn't know what I was going to build, but I knew I was going to build something great. And from an early age, I don't know why, I had a intuition that I should probably build myself up to be great first, if that makes sense. Because, as I said, I was quite young, and I was like, at 15, 14, 15, I don't really know if I'm going to, build a massive business. And first of all, that wasn't really even in my scope back then. I always thought from the age of 14, I was like, I'll be a real estate agent. It was a really cool show I used to watch called $1 Million Listing. And especially like the US ones, because in the UK, and where I was living, I didn't notice at the time, but you don't actually really make much money as a estate agent. So I was watching like the US one, and I was like, man, it's so entertaining. I was looking at the commissions. I was like, this is insane. And I was like, oh, and you don't have to get a university degree. Like from the age of 14, I was like, there's no chance in hell I'm going to university. Like I even told my mom, I was like, there's no chance. So initially the plan was become a real estate agent and then eventually get into the property game. So, yeah.
Well, it seemed to have worked out for you so well, but I want to talk just about that situation of dropping out of high school, because 4 days before you dropped out of high school, you passed by your principal's office when you overheard a conversation that one of your teachers said, that's what happens when you have a kid that young. It's a pretty crazy statement to overhear about yourself at that age. How did that come to be where you overheard that, and how did that imprint on you going forward?
Shit. Sorry if I can't swear, but yeah, Danny, you
can.
You've done your research, man. I'm impressed. Yeah, so basically I had I had a very like funny upbringing where like me and my mom were on government benefits at some point. At some point, she was working minimum wage. Like my mom was married to my stepdad, but it was sort of like mutually beneficial. But I never really saw my stepdad. It was a very weird childhood. It was a very very difficult childhood. But it was just interesting, I guess. So, anyways, long story short, it was weird because I went to private school, but then my mom and I were on like government benefits, which is kind of like the same thing as like welfare. And it was basically just me and my mom having to fend for ourselves. So some of my friends knew this, like my close friends knew this, other people didn't. I got very close with some of my teachers, and some of my teachers knew this, only just a few, the rest didn't. So, I guess whatever, you see this kid and, it looks like he's throwing away his life because whatever, he's, not focusing in school and, and he's dropping out and, he's in a private school and, I guess all, to give some credit to the teacher that I overheard say that, it's like, obviously it's not a nice thing to say, because first of all, she's not even talking about me, she's talking about my mother, that whatever, that's what happens when you have a kid that young, as in like, my mother was somehow unfit to have me, considering she had me at 22, which by the way, like, when you have a Russian mother, that's actually pretty old. But, yeah, so I mean, like, I guess some credit to her. I guess I can understand how it's like from the outside, but yeah, some of my teachers knew that, like, I dropped out of school. When I dropped out of school, I was making, equivalent of like maybe like $9,000, $10,000. So some of my teachers knew that, some didn't. And also, like, the reason I wasn't focusing in school was, well, actually I hated school. Like, actually I probably wouldn't focus regardless, but it's not like I was, I don't know, on playing some game or something. Like, I was literally doing client work, like, while I was in class. I was reaching out to potential clients, I was sending out proposals, doing all the things that actually don't work, but whatever, you think they make sense because you just are off in the world of business. So yeah, it was obviously it was not a nice thing to hear, because for me it's like, I don't ever care if someone throws, or back then especially, if now obviously my mom gets applaud as like, oh, you're a superhero and you did so well as a mother. And then it's like, in 2017 people looked at her, and even the parents in my school, like, the people in my school's parents, like, looked at her like a failed mother and this and that. And then now they're like, hold them up. But you can't hold grudges. Like, that's just the way the world works, I guess. It all, looking back, it all makes sense, but at the time, it looks like the worst decision ever. So yeah, whatever. Like, it was what it was.
Yeah. Did you use that as a chip on your shoulder at that time? Like, I'm going to show this teacher.
Yeah, I was.
How did you take that?
It wasn't so much the teacher. I think it was just kind of everyone. And I guess, like, for me as well, going to private school, it was very like there's a lot of people who take pride in the things that their parents have done, which was just always kind of got under my skin. And even to this day, like, I, especially growing up in London, like, and then it's like going to private school, but then having like probably the most financially challenged upbringing of everyone I knew, because it wasn't even like we had no money. It's like I had no money, had to support my mom. Then when I turned 18, like, just went through a whole crazy year in terms of like my mom and my stepdad finally divorcing, and like having to spend a lot of money in legal fees because he was basically just a psychopath, and a lot of slander stuff, and trying to keep us in the country. There's just a lot of crazy stuff. But anyways, so it wasn't so much like a chip on my shoulder towards the teacher. It was more just like, I don't know, like I said, I don't like people who take, like, for me, I don't know, like I think you have to earn your stripes, right? And growing up, I guess in the school that I did, a lot of people took pride in the things that their parents had accomplished, and I mull over that a lot when I think about how I'm going to raise my children. So,
yeah, I was listening to another podcast you were in to research this one, and I heard you say, I'm not going to leave my kids anything, basically, and it's all going to go to schools in Nepal or building schools in other places. I thought that was interesting. What makes you say that? And what are your plans to raise your children? Because I know you're only 21 or 22 right now, but you're very forward thinking in your approach and your life. So I know you've thought about the plan you're going to raise your children with.
Yeah. So with my children, it's a tough one because I want to give them the best education possible. And basically the thing is with my children is I never want to give them something that they get a sense of pride from, that they haven't earned themselves. Like, for example, I'm very into watches. I will never give everyone wants to sort of pass down a watch to their child. I'm okay. Like, maybe when they're 30 or something like that, and they've made it on their own, maybe then I'll pass something down and it'll be meaningful. But I don't want, or if it is, like, for example, let's say if I give my kids something on their 18th, it'll be, a watch that's still pretty expensive. Maybe like a Jaeger LeCoultre, like a watch person's watch, that's very expensive, but like, no, they're not going to walk into school and be like, I have a JLC on my wrist. Whereas like, you give them a Rolex for even half the price, and they walk into school and, everyone thinks they're cool and this and that. So yeah, my kids aren't going to get anything because it's like, man, it's, all this stuff is very like, money is really like fucks you up, honestly. Like, money fucks you up. Even to this day, like I fight with it. Like it's a really weird thing. Like when you have money and it's, like everyone says, I hear this all the time. Like Instagram is probably the worst place to get your advice from on earth because it's just a cesspool of just the stupidest shit I've ever heard. Like you see all the time, like money doesn't make you happy, but I'd rather cry in a Toyota than a Lambo. It's like, that's not true at all. Like it's way worse to cry in a Lambo because if you cry in a Lambo, then it's like, genuinely, it's like, there's nothing left to hide. Like you're naked. It's like you're you're crying because you're fundamentally unhappy, and that's really scary. And like I've even faced that in the past few years where it's like I'm not happy, and it's like, and it's not an extended period of time, but it could be even a couple months or something, and I'm like, you're not happy because like there's nothing left. Like there's no next check mark that you can be like, okay, once I get that, then I'll be happy. It's like you've checked all the check marks that one could want. Like it's your fucking fault, dude. So as I said, I think money just brings a whole host of like just weird complications, and I genuinely think is like, and I will say I had this, and here's a clip that I'm sure someone will clip this and then hold it up as a way to cancel me. But luckily I'm so, if anyone see my social media, I'm like, I try to cancel myself before anyone else can cancel me. I really am. I talk about anything and everything. I think it's very different for men and women. Men without work have no, and by the way, this can be the masculine and the feminine polarity. So those women who are it's a small sliver. It's no more than 10%, but like, there's women who are really just very masculine in their core, and men who are just very feminine in their core. And, so I'm talking more about the masculine and the feminine energy, but like, men as a whole, we have to conquer. Like that's what we're here to do. Whereas with women, it's very different. So I actually was having this conversation with a friend of mine. Is like, my son will never get anything for sure. My daughter, sometimes I think about that. I'm like, if she found something that really makes her, and this is like, for example, like where I know a person's level of intellect is very low when they bring up stuff like the gender pay gap. It doesn't take a genius to figure out women do enjoy doing stuff that on average gets paid less. So, for example, and the reason I say this is because, I would love for my daughter to have an incredible quality of life. And let's say she does end up deciding that her passion is something that's not extremely well paying, but she does it, number one, and number two, she has great reverence, a deep reverence and great respect for the craft, and she puts 100% in, then maybe I might supplement her income. If my son does that, you're on your own.
It's funny. I think that the intention is good in terms of helping. We want men and women to be equal. We want to treat people the same way, but that can sometimes manifest itself in incorrect behavior or behavior that doesn't actually make sense to our core as human beings. So it's a fascinating thing, treating people differently.
The world has gone fucking crazy, man. Like it's, I think it's growing up, like one of my biggest superpowers, honestly, is having a Russian mother, like an Eastern European mother who grew up in the Soviet Union. Like, she's just so non-bullshit, you know, and it's like, man, I'm honestly so blessed. Like, I'm just being honest, I would hate to grow up in the US. Like, your guys, like, I see your guys, obviously not you, but like, as a whole, like the US, like the Western world, man, the morals are just so fucked. So, yeah.
Yeah, I also think that it's different when you're outside of the system looking into it versus actually in it. You experience different things, and the way it's portrayed might not be how it actually is. So that's one thing. But, you know, I see a lot of similarities between you and Gary Vaynerchuk in the sense of entrepreneurs from a young age, both have Russian mom and both adore Russian mom and have a deep level of self-awareness for themselves and the world around them. And I just find that fascinating. Have you stopped and thought about that comparison or similarity at all?
No, to be honest, I think he's pretty different to me. Like, he's yeah, I don't know. I think he's pretty different to me in the sense of, like, there's stuff I hear him say that I vehemently disagree with. I think
like what? Let's get into it.
Like the whole, like, oh, in your 20s, like, eat shit for your 20s. I believe that, but I believe you should be compensated for it. Like, I think as a man, right? And once again, the reason I speak so much like about manhood is because, like, that's an area of interest of mine. You know, growing up, no father, having to figure this whole shit out on my own, et cetera, et cetera. And as I said, like, men and women have very different paths in the same way. Like, there's nuances, you know, in the same way. Like, if you grow up in the Western world compared to the Eastern world, different nuances. Like, it's just everything is nuanced, right? But anyways, the reason I say all this is because, like, for me personally, I think the best time to build is between, like, 18 and 26, right? And I also don't agree with, like for example, like, I would never want his life in the sense of, like, he never had a 20s or a 30s. Like, for me, it's just important to collect experiences as it is to collect money. And he's a psycho. I respect it. You know, I respect it more than anything, right? In the same way I respect, like, there's a lot of people who look at me and they're like, dude, it's not even like you don't never need to work again. Like, you have, like, you have insane amounts of money. Like, you know, if I took all of my liquid net worth and I put that into, like, I did something like yield farming and I invested it, with pretty much, you know, zero risk, I'd be making $1.9 million a year net after tax. Never having, like, working, even if I slept 23 hours a day, 365 days a year, it doesn't matter. You know, and a lot of people will look at that and be like, dude, why? Like, in the same way I look at Gary Vee and I'm like, dude, you're insane. Like, how, like, do you not feel like you're not missing out on stuff? And I have, like, friends of mine that look at me and they're like, dude, you're insane. Like, what? Just, you're done. Like, that's it. You won. Like, go enjoy your life. Yeah. And, you know, for me, there's more pillars I want to, and more benchmarks I want to get to. So I guess, you know, everyone, like I said, I respect Gary Vee for the way that he approaches things. I also respect my friends who are like, dude, like, I have a much better quality of life because I just, you know, I'm sure I make $100K a year. But yeah, I surf and I do this and I do that. And, you know, I would never want your life and your responsibility with your companies. But yeah, a lot of stuff with Gary Vee. And to be honest, I think it's a lot of mainstream stuff as well. It's very, like, I think it's good sound bites, but it's not good practically. And I think I think maybe sometimes some of his content needs to, he needs to provide a little bit more nuance for where you are in your stage of the journey. Because, like, once you get to a certain stage, it's like hard work is actually about as low down as it gets on the importance factor, and things that really move the needle. So I think it's just like, maybe if they were just, but I also get it. Like, you know, his audience is very mass market, so he needs to appeal to a broader range.
Yeah. Well, one thing I think you guys have in common is the extreme sense of responsibility for the self. and self-responsibility being a huge component. And you have a tattoo of Atlas Shrugged. And I'm curious how that came to be. Was that a book you read when you were a kid?
Yeah. So,
and
yes.
Take me through that.
Sorry to interrupt. So Atlas Shrugged, basically the author Ayn Rand, one of my favorite authors, like Atlas Shrugged, and then Fountainhead. I remember reading Fountainhead. I was like 15. It was like 1,100 pages or something. I was like, once I finished, I was like, fuck, man, if I can read this, I can read anything. But Atlas Shrugged was a book that really stuck with me, which is why I have it tattooed right here. So, yeah, Atlas Shrugged was something that like stuck with me a lot, and I think it's like a responsibility, as you said. It's kind of like a responsibility that it's like a love and hate thing. Like sometimes I feel so like bogged down, and I'm like, I have this sense of responsibility, and I don't know why. Like there's just so many. There's a lot of things that I take care of and people that I take care of, and like just a lot of extra responsibility I put on my shoulders that I don't necessarily need to. Like whether that be speaking out about things that I think aren't right, whether that be with severe hindrance to me and my career and stuff like that, whether that be obviously taking care of my mom, retired my mom from a young age, whether that be building all the schools in Nepal, like which one would look at and go, why are you doing this? And it said like it's something that I actually almost resented for a little bit, where I was like, why am I doing this? Like just take care of yourself, like and yeah, I don't know, it's something I've always fought with, and I'm like, but then I guess my biggest blessing, like I guess I realized like the reason I am where I am today is because yes, of course I give, and I am very I don't know, like I put a lot of responsibility on, but I'm like, but that is the biggest blessing. Like you have all this stuff because you take all this responsibility on. So I don't know. It's like just also the thing to remind me, like basically the consensus of that book is like what, Atlas Shrugged, like holding up the world. Like what if all the people who felt the way that I feel, what if they all just like shrugged? Like what if they all just like were like, fuck this responsibility. Like the world wouldn't go round. And yeah, man, like I think that's why, I'm a very small, tiny, insignificant person in this world, but like, the people who sort of think the way that I do, like most of them live a very like tormented life. Like it's very difficult, and it's a lot of it's a lot of responsibility, but in the same way, it's the biggest blessing. So I always have to remind myself of that.
That makes sense. And so we were touching before about the difficulties of having everything you want, but still not feeling whole. And I know that summer 2020 was that time for you.
Yeah.
So take me through what was the thought pattern, what was going on, and what did you do to get out of that?
Yeah. So, basically summer 2020, I had just come off the back of probably the best sort of emotionally and like just like I don't know, mental state, like the best 6 months that I could have remembered. It's just around the time that the world started locking down, that. I was in Cape Town from January, right beginning of January, all the way until the end of June. So that was like 6 months. I basically got stuck there during lockdown, and I just 3 weeks before or something like that, just come out of like a long-term relationship. Like a not super long term, but longish term relationship, like 2 years. And it was actually great. Like just I was me and one of my best friends, Pete. We were like, he was basically like my little quarantine date, and we basically just lived together. And it was good. Like I was meditating a lot. I was just getting a lot of sun, being in Cape Town. Like it was just very like peace. I felt very at peace. So I came from that, and then I came to London. I came back to London, finally managed to get back in. And I don't know what happened, dude. Like it was just one day, it was somewhere around beginning of July to like end of August. It was like a 6-8 week period where like I woke up and I started having panic attacks. And I'd never experienced panic attacks, anxiety, anything like that before. Like, I was, I'd been meditating from the age of like 14, like every single day, pretty religiously. always just kind of took care of myself mentally. I thought I did at least. And to be honest, to this day, I still don't know what went on in that 6 to 8 weeks, but it was wake up every single day, panic attack. And obviously me being smart and thinking you can fix everything, in the physical world. I went and I, sat down and I started to meditate straight away every morning and thought that would make things go away, doing breath work exercises and maybe a little bit of Wim Hof and this and that, and, maybe that quiet and the noises or the voices for a little bit. But dude, it was like, I'm a person who, maybe cries once every year and a half, 2 years. Like I cried multiple times a day, every single day for, 4 to 6 weeks. It was to the point where like the right-hand man in one of my companies, we were actually up in Manchester. I was like boxing for like 6 weeks at the time. And like he was sat next to me and we just got off a team meeting and like we get off the team meeting, I break down. Bear in mind, it's like the right-hand man in my company. Like obviously, I have a great relationship, consider him a friend and this and that, but like still, like it's like, it's not very appropriate to do this. I just start breaking down and I look at him and I'm like, dude, honestly, I think a lot of times I think it'd be easier if I just wasn't here. And there was like, especially like a 2-3 week period where I was like heavily, like not even contemplating, like strategizing how I would do it. Cause I knew that if I ended things, and it looked like it was suicide, my mom wouldn't be around for much longer. Like that would be it. So I was strategizing ways that I could do it where it looked natural, so no one in my life would take blame for it. And dude, in the spiritual world, there's something called a dark night of the soul experience. I guess that was my dark night of the soul experience. And to this day, I don't still know why. I just came off the back of a very good six months of my life. And yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of stuff from like my childhood. Like I had a very, outside of the, because people ask like, did your childhood, is that the reason you are the way you are today? And the financial struggles is yes, because that drove me. The other stuff, like I grew up seeing just some very like fucked up stuff. Like I had a very like dark and twisted childhood. Like I had to grow up very, very quick. I saw a lot of things very early on that you're not really meant to see as a kid. So that sort of stuff, even like my close friends, don't really know much about what I went through growing up. But even with the stuff they do, they're like, dude, I'm surprised you're not more fucked up. And I'm like, no, I'm surprised my mom's not more fucked up because, she had to go through that. And then everything that my mom went through with my biological father, my mom lives a fucking crazy life, man. So yeah, that summer of the 2020, I don't know if it was like past demons kind of coming back and just being like, you can't run away from us that much longer. But yeah, whatever. Everyone has a reason this stuff pops about. But the one thing that I did very well, or one thing that I'm very glad that I did, was I had a lot of good people in my corner. And that's the thing, like a lot of my close friends are like very spiritual, or like a lot of, not close friends, but a lot of the people I look up to. Like I have lots of friends that are worth hundreds of millions and billions, and like, my network is insane. Or like, I guess I'm actually I'm a very closed off person. I don't really network much even. So I wouldn't even say so much my network, more the people trying to network with me, because they're like, oh, the 22-year-old whiz kid, like, blah, blah. And yeah, I've got a lot of friends who are worth hundreds of millions and even billions, and they're not the people that I look up to, honestly. Like they're not the ones that I like, in my mind, I'm like, how can I be more like this person? Of course, in some facets of life, but it's more like my spiritual friends that, don't make that much money, but like, I respect them as people. And like, doesn't matter all the worldly possessions and success I've had and this and that, especially considering my age, if you put them and me next to each other, like you'll see I'm quite clearly still a boy and they're a man. Yeah, I'm lucky that I had a lot of them in my corner to kind of guide me through what was quite clearly my dark night of the soul experience. And I had a very intense bout, but I was very lucky that it wasn't long lasting.
Yeah, what was so fascinating to me was hearing that at 5 p.m. every day it would just go away, and that was just like, I've never heard anything like that. But
Dude, it was that.
I wonder why that was.
That's why I felt it was like almost like demonic. Like it was. I would wake up and like the first thing I was thinking, I was like, "Fuck this! I'm gonna kill myself." And it was like that all day. And then at 5, it was the weirdest fucking thing. At 5 or like 6, it just went away. And I was like laughing, like I was like me again. And it was like, it really felt like either some sort of bipolar thing, or like it genuinely felt as though there was like something consuming, like pulling the strings. And then it was like showing me that it was there and its power. And then it let me be me again at 5 every day. Like it was, I don't know, it was very odd.
I think that we tend to overestimate sometimes the amount of control we have about particular things, like a thought that just comes into your mind. Where does that thought come from? Like, why are you thinking that thing in that moment? And, you know, I think it's good on one hand to have extreme responsibility for what you do, but try to picture or try to predict the next words that will come out of your mouth. It's like, where does that come from? Where does that truth come from? So it's something I think about a lot, and I think it's important to realize that you can have extreme responsibility for things, but also understand that we are just pawns in this game of life.
Yeah, I think you know, as more time goes on, you really start to realize that as well. Like it takes a very wise person to, it takes a very wise person to take heed of that. Like it's, as I said, it's as time goes on, you like submit more and more, as you said, to the fact that like, you know a lot less than you think you know, and you're probably everything that you've accomplished, of course, is a large part, or definitely there's a portion of you, but you realize a lot of it is, the world coming together in certain ways, and it's a lot less of it is in your control than you probably first think when you're a little less wise.
Yeah. So we spoke about one of your tattoos, the Atlas Shrugged tattoo. I'm curious about the private victories one.
Yeah, so the private victories one is just private victories kind of became a bit of a buzzword. It's from I believe it's 7 Habits of Highly Successful People, and it's basically this whole idea of public victories and private victories. And I think a lot. I guess I was thinking a lot, like especially as I was starting to get like, you get to like a level of success where like, you know, and I hit this when I was 17, where, you know, you're making like 10,000 a month, and, you know, maybe like, 30,000 a month, 40,000 a month, whatever. And then you get to like, and you can do really cool stuff with that. And that's probably like the most, like, that's the golden era where like you can start to travel and you can start to have like a really cool apartment and all this stuff. And then you start to get to like, I remember when I was 18, I was in New York on a client 2-day training, and I was, flown out business class, paid $20,000 for the 2 days. That month was the first month I hit $200,000 profit in a month, and I was like 18. And like I was able to do like sort of a little bit more like FU money kind of stuff. And I remember I was like 2019. I started to enjoy myself a little more when I turned 19 and whatnot. And I was seeing like all of these like sort of like worldly possessions and like these like physical things. And I was like, these are like the public victories. And I was like, man, if people knew like the amount of private victories that went into it. And obviously, me being young, and still to this day, I'm sure if you saw me, you'd probably just be like, it's probably like some trust fund kid or something like that. If like, you just saw me walking down the street or this or that. And, so I found it funny because 2019, I really started getting into watches, like very expensive watches. I had, watches that are worth 100,000, 200,000 on my wrist at the age of 19. And, I would always have people look, I'd see them look at my wrist, and then I see them do like a double take look at me, and I already knew what they were thinking. So that's why it's always just like a little funny thing to me. It's like, private victories, like you guys don't know the private victories that I could see you looking at my wrist. You guys don't know the private victories that went into it to make this stuff possible. So it's just like a little reminder to myself. It was a little reminder to myself that, hey, if you want the public victories, you have to stack the private victories, many multiples more in order to make that happen. number one, that. Number two, as I said, it's not funny at all, but it's, for me, it is like a little, made you look kind of thing.
Yeah, brings a smile to your face. It's so funny because so much of your life is public in the sense of like you put your net worth out there, you talk about, how much money you've made. Was there any hesitation to do that? Was there thought into, I'm going to put everything out there? I mean, it's cool to share, like when you're making $10,000 a month, this is what I'm making. When you get to another level, is there like a level of, I'm going to need to hire security at some point if I keep doing this or anything like that?
No, I mean, I think, people might look at it and be like, oh, why is he, made a video on how he made $10 million in 2021. It's like, well, yeah, I also made a video of like there's clips. People still send me clips back in 2015 where it's like, this guy sent me a clip and it's like me like in the bus and I'm like laughing with my friend. I'm like, dude, hopefully like next year we'll be able to afford to like Uber everywhere. These are like fucking $6, $8 Ubers, right? It's like, it's nothing to like, nothing flashy, but, in the same way that I had no qualms about posting me going to Brixton Bookmongers because like it was just more economical at that stage to like buy used books than it was to buy new books. Like I was very open and honest about sharing then, so why would I be any less open and honest about sharing now? And I think it's different when you come out the gate and you're already a millionaire or multimillionaire and this and that. Like there's as I said, like people could look back on my YouTube back to 2015 where like I was like, you can see on my YouTube literally everything from like when I was making fitness videos of like, okay, this is what I'm doing right now in the gym, and here's the book that I'm reading this week, and here's blah blah, and like and you can see all the way from that to like me signing my first ever client. I'm like, so I just signed my first ever client, and it's big, and my goal, it's 2016. My goal this year is to make 10,000 pounds like in the entire year, and then you can see me in 2017 when I signed like sort of my first really my first few sort of high ticket clients. And I'm like, I just, signed this client for $2,500 a month. And, I just got my first, had my first 10K month and this is insane. And all the way to, each sort of, check, benchmark. And I think the thing that I try to really get across, in my YouTube channel, which as I said, is, I guess, very different. Like I'm very not PG compared to like a lot of other people. Like I want to show, like I was thinking about this. I was like, right now I'm in a stage where like, I like to be very open and honest and help people increase their wealth. I think the next thing that I would love to do, and this is maybe from 25 onwards, because I'll get to a point where I feel as though I'm done and I've sort of saturated everything about, like I've helped people get to that point. The next point will probably be something along the lines of like, I want to help more with men with sort of, I guess, their like social life and like a lot of like their social life, their dating life. Like I just see, like, as I said, a lot of like issues in that world. And I don't know, somehow I'd love to contribute with that. And then I guess the last thing that I would love to do is like just help people with their trauma and their spiritual journey and stuff. And like I feel as though between those three, probably once those three are done, then I'll go offline fully and probably never post another video again and delete all my socials and stuff like that. But for now, it's like I'm just sharing stuff as I go along, and it's like I can help people make a lot of money, and like I'm pretty good at that, and I've done that in multiple different verticals and multiplied it many times over with investments. I can help people with a lot of things that I've learned, and one day I'll be able to help people with like really deep trauma work, and when that happens I'll be able to share that. But like I'm learning stuff as I go along, and I'm just sharing it sort of real time.
Yeah, it's cool to witness the progression, and especially for somebody who's been so open and so vulnerable with their life. It's cool to witness. And I was thinking the other day, like, we haven't seen a 20-year YouTuber because the YouTube hasn't existed for that long. And it's like when you really get to watch someone's journey as it unfolds, it's a really special thing. So, one thing I was complimenting you about before we hit record was that you've gone from working on your body and personal training, then you went to agency life, and now you're into crypto. But what is so fascinating about you, for someone like me, is that you have stayed consistent with all the things. You've stacked those habits and stacked those wins so that when you're onto the crypto, you're not totally disregarding your body or your mind with meditation. And I'm curious how you've gone about doing that, or why you think you've been able to do stacking in that way where you haven't totally disregarded something after being successful at it.
Yeah, so I think that's probably like the biggest key and the biggest thing ever is like stack. And I even think these days when I'm looking at like a skill or like a trait I want to embody, I go, okay, let's say everything in my life, let's say like the thing that I think it's going to apply to no longer applies to. Like, let's say there's a specific business that I want to learn this trait for. Let's say if that business goes away, is that something that will still, give me dividends for decades to come? So I think the other reason the stacking stuff is very important, and I guess the one thing that I did well was I stacked correctly. Like the big sort of thing I think I stacked was like self-education. Like that was the sort of big first stack, building block that I stacked was like learning self-education and meditation. Then it was like, body and, gym and nutrition and this and that. And then the big thing after that was like social skills. Like, man, I was like 16 going out with all my friends who were like 21, 22, like in the clubs, like in the best clubs in London with my fake ID, like, talking to women and, doing all this crazy stuff in the clubs and whatnot. Back then lying about my age and all this stuff. And, after that point, and also like when I was like, when I was 14 was the first time I ever did LSD. Like by the time I was like 15, like I'd done MDMA, coke, like basically like all the drugs. And like, I am so grateful that I did, because like if a lot of people get like washed up in that once they end up making a lot of money, and a lot of people get washed up in like the glitz and glam of like women. And I've seen a lot of like even businessmen, like very respectable men, like get washed up because they're all of their energy is going towards like women. And like, don't get me wrong, like I have
you got it out of your system.
I mean, don't get me wrong, I have a lot of fun in that sense. Like, probably more fun than anyone else I know, although I try to stay a little bit more private about that stuff. But it's never my priority, right? Like my priority is always my mission and my work. And I think, as I said, like the way that I think looking back, that's the thing I'm the most grateful of is like sort of the linear path, because as I said, I've seen it where, the first thing that people stack is wealth, and then they get to this certain point and it's like, they have money, but then it's like, dude, then they go fucking crazy. They like go crazy, and like all they can think about is like, how do I have those like fun dating experiences that I've always wanted. But the thing is, they may have the money, and they think that will get you that, but then it's like, it doesn't. Like you have to learn social skills, and you have to learn, like there's just so many things that go into it. Or like, they get all this stuff, and then they're like, oh yeah, but like my health's not in order, and I want to be jacked, and I want to be this and that. And like, then they, I think the order of things is also, I guess, quite important. So yeah, all of these things just kind of stack up on each other. And the more things you can stack, the better quality of life will be. And the thing that I do as well a lot is I get really into something. Like I throw myself into something, and then I do it in a, I don't want to say an unhealthy way, but an unbalanced way. And then I really back out. Like I'll do it, I'll go through an immersion, and I'll be like, okay, how do I actually now integrate this into my life in a sort of sustainable way? Like even when I was like 14, 15, like I was meditating an hour a day. For me right now, that's just not too practical. Sometimes I meditate more than others. I mean, now more recently, it's been 15 minutes in the morning, 30 minutes before bed, which is, pretty decent. A lot of times in the year, it's like 10 minutes or 15 minutes, just a 10 or 15 minute meditation. So same thing with like fitness, same thing with, all sorts of stuff. It's I get really immersed in it, and then I sort of try to integrate.
Yeah, I think that's super helpful, because one thing that a practical example for people could be like when I started to track my calories and track macros for the first time. I did that for a year. I don't need to do that every year for the rest of my life. If things go out of control with my body, I know what I can do to get back, but now I can just eyeball and it makes sense. So It's that period of complete lockdown in that specific avenue, and then just you can use the knowledge. And so that's certainly really helpful. For you, have you thought about using any of these building blocks that you're talking about and creating courses around them? I know you have the education company, and I know it's mostly about wealth building at this particular time, particularly around the agency space. But have you said, oh, maybe I should teach a class on physical fitness or meditation or something like that?
Yeah. So, the thing that I'm an expert in, right, is building. Yeah. Well, I guess for me, that business right there, my agency, which I started 5.5 years ago. Like, that's the thing that I'm most proficient at. I have other businesses. But as I said, that's kind of like my area of expertise. And not only my area of expertise, that is the business where, if you want to get to 10K a month, like, there's just nothing better than a service-based business. And it's because you can fall flat on your ass for 4 months, never sign a client, have no success, and it's not costing you anything. Whereas a lot of these other business models, there's actual genuine running costs. And if you fail, there are repercussions to it. If you fail, with and you buy stock, I don't have them lying around. I have an e-commerce brand. We make these really cool blue light blockers. There's been periods where I've sent $150,000 for a new batch, a new production, and I don't see that flip over in revenue for 9 months, right? So the reason that I kind of have my education company, around agencies, and I've stuck to agencies, even though I'll be honest, I know I could make way more money if I had taught people e-commerce or like this thing or that thing, like, and if I got into other stuff. But the reason I kind of stuck true is because, like, that's the way that I got to 20K a month, 30K a month when I was 17 years old. So yeah, that's why we helped sort of two people in my company, GaryVee.com, or my education platform. The people who want to get to, are in college. By the way, this isn't a pitch. This is like literally just to give you context as to what we do. We help sort of like your everyday person, because like I genuinely believe that's the best model, and that's like from 0 to 10. And then we help the people who are like 10, 20, or even 5, 10, and they want to get to like 100K a month with their agency. And what I will do is I will try to like frame it as in business, but then I'm gonna sneak in as much shit that will actually help you as possible. Like, dude, in my programs, I talk about like in my program that tries to get people 10K a month. And I mean, look, there's people in there that have gone on to do 50, 60, but like that's sort of the main demographic. There's 4 or 5 hours on like mindset stuff about like meditation, detox work, how to remove distraction from your environments, how to remove EMFs, like sort of the more life level stuff. I run people through my monk mode protocol. Like, I realize, like, honestly, 70% of success is just stop drinking, stop smoking weed. I don't care if you say it's productive. It does not help you. You're not one of those people who's more creative on weed. I don't care. Get 9 hours of sleep, which sounds, counterproductive, but it's not. Trust me. If you can do those 3 things, you're honestly pretty much 70% of the way there to like having a successful business. Because the tactics, they're honestly, like, why is it? You look at it. You look at sample size of like, let's say there's whatever. 1,000 people who watch the same course or like watch the similar sort of YouTube videos. Like, why did one be more successful? It's just because they were able to they all saw the same information. It's the way, how did you digest and implement that information? So quite like information isn't necessarily, information is available, right? And of course there's stuff that's more impactful because it's taught by someone, or it's presented to you by someone who's just been so in the trenches for so long that they know things that other people don't. But for the most part, like, information is readily available. So that's why, like, in my programs, I sneak stuff in there. Like, I'll lure you in with like the business stuff. Like, I'm going to by the end of it, your mind is going to be a lot more quieter. You're going to be a much better person. You're going to understand company culture. You're going to understand yourself. And that's like the 10K program. And then, even in the 100K program, or, program that's trying to get people to 100K a month, I've got my detox coach in there. We talk about psychedelics, which sounds like, why would that be in a business course? But we talk about psychedelics. We talk about detoxing protocols like Epsom salt baths, like heavy steam sauna, like liver cleanses. This stuff sounds like it shouldn't be important to get into 100K a month, but trust me, like, it is. We talk about like serious sleep biohacking stuff. So yeah, it's on that point, I don't think I'll ever be, strictly help people with health or this or that. And, there's people who are much better at it than me. But it's in my communities, and even through my YouTube videos and stuff like that. As I said, like, I'm not very like politically correct, and I don't give sort of like the standard advice. And like a lot of people want to make punchy videos. Like, I'll share my 7 life lessons for 2021 and just sit for an hour and just talk about stuff that's just probably most people won't really talk about. So yeah, I don't think I'd ever dedicate like my full life or education platform to those topics, but I want to sneak them in as much as possible because they're very important.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it seems like you do a good job of that, especially on your YouTube channel. You just said you had a detox coach. I've never heard anybody say they have a detox coach. What does that mean? How did you get a detox coach? And take me through that.
Yeah, so detox coach is like, there's a lot of like, there's a lot of stuff in what we drink and what we eat, in what we put on our skin that slowly kills us. And, when you're trying to get to a certain level, you're trying to get that next edge. So for me, I've worked with, I've spent hundreds and hundreds of thousands on different biohacking equipment, medical grade devices that aren't even available unless you get a doctor's prescription. Like I have something called a Beamer I sleep on. I've tried hyperbaric chambers. I've tried a red light therapy device. I have all this stuff in my house. I've spent hundreds of thousands. And I will say, like, once again, it's a similar sort of thing. You try everything and then you start to realize that actually probably usually less is more. But yeah, in terms of the detox coach, like, I took my training very seriously and my recovery very seriously, but he was like that sort of cherry on top where, he helped me with a lot of like, liver cleanse stuff, a lot of detoxification stuff, a lot of like limiting the EMFs around me, stuff that a lot of people sort of roll their eyes at, but like, I can tell you it works. So yeah, 2019, I worked with.
How'd you find a detox coach? Just through Instagram or?
No, on YouTube. So like, usually the best channels are the ones that many people are looking at. I don't know how I found this channel, but like, I just watched like this 2-hour podcast. And yeah, once again, I just did like, he had this 2-hour like presentation. And he was talking about how he actually ended up, he had 4 or 5 year bout with suicide and depression. And this was someone who was like an ex, what was it, like a Brazilian jiu-jitsu or something like that, like a champion. Like point is like, someone who is very proficient, at his craft, and was a world champion at it, and went from that to like, having to teach his friend like a triangle choker, so that way he would choke him out so he wouldn't jump off the 35th floor of his apartment, and like, I don't know, the thing that like, I barely ever cry, but I don't know why, like when it comes to like seeing strong men like cry, like, I don't know, it just brings a tear to my eye. So I saw that, and a large part of that was he had heavy mercury poisoning from like fillings, and then I started looking into that. I'd seen like a lot of examples. I just started to realize there's just a lot of shit, as I said, we put in our system, in our bodies, in our stuff that like, that yeah, is killing us. And I'm gonna do this stuff regardless. Like, when I'm not in monk mode, I will drink. I will, I'm not perfect in this life. I will poison myself and, do all this stuff. But day to day, if I can mitigate it as much as possible, then I'd like to.
What's the coach's name, if you don't mind sharing?
His name's Josh Mason, a guy called Detox Dudes. He runs a company.
Cool. Yeah, no, we'll check that out. And, it's funny you mentioned you will do all the fun, crazy stuff like the caffeine, alcohol, whatever. And it's interesting because we live in a world of abundance, right? Where you can have basically anything you want. And in the past, people lived in a world of scarcity. And it's like the abundance is great, but you just need to have safeguards around it. So how you've managed to do it is monk mode and non-monk mode. Are there any other safeguards you've put in place to limit yourself in a world of abundance?
No, I think monk mode is the main thing because monk mode and environment. Like, yeah, dude, I'm very, I struggle with that a lot. Like, dude, and as I said, once again, I think this is where it's like, I change. Like, I will say it's also different in the recent years because it's like from 2014 all the way up until like I'd be 14 years old and like my friends would like want to hang out and I'd be like, no, because I haven't finished my book for the week. Like I won't hang out until
Wow.
like it's, even though I had nothing I had to do, to me, it was the principle, like I'm building, like, and this will pay off one day. So in all fairness, I went through that from like 2014 all the way up until like 2019. In 2019, I started letting my hair down a little bit more, and I still would have fun growing up. As I said, I would, go to the clubs and dabble in a bunch of fun different experiences and whatnot. But for the most part, I was like 98% of the time I was very, very straight shooter. And now it's just I got at a stage in my businesses where I have an incredible team, and I've realized literally the most important thing once you get to a certain stage is hiring and maintaining a good company culture. And getting to a point where whatever you need to do, there's someone in your team who will do it better than you anyways. And you're just there to steer the ship. So now that I've gotten to that point, now it's a little bit more difficult because it's like, man, when you have money, which means you have options in terms of like when you have location freedom, time, not only do I have financial freedom, a lot of people have financial freedom, but I have time freedom and location freedom. I can travel whenever, wherever. My time is highly leveraged. Because I, my incredible team, and I don't really need to work ever again if I don't want to, as I said, because my investments have gone to a certain point. So because of all these things in place, and also just being young, and being in certain social circles, like, dude, there's temptation and there's like fun things going on, 24/7. And that's why I was like, I'm very. Some people can do balance, I can't, and I wish I could. Like, I'm very like, okay, I'm not drinking alcohol, no alcohol, no caffeine, no sugar, doing my monk, 30 minutes a day meditation, doing my monk mode protocol. And I will do that 6 months a year. And then 4 months a year, I'll be, I say this jokingly, like a raging alcoholic. Like I'll be, that's the way usually my year, recently, like 2019, 2020, and 2021, it's like 6 months a year, super focused in, super knuckle down. Following back then what was a monk mode protocol, but I didn't call it that. I just put that, I threw up on my story like 2021, like, monk mode, blah, blah, and then just kind of caught on. But yeah, like that's the way I do it, like first 6 months a year. Cause also like the other thing is, a lot of people, they go against the current, or they go against the tide. Like and I think this is where it's very important to know yourself, right? And have self-awareness. Like I'm a person who just for whatever reason, the first 5-6 months a year, there's nothing I care about except for work. Like I don't know. It's just the way the things are. And by the time that it gets to June, July, August, there is nothing that I care about except for having a glass of wine, and traveling and fucking having crazy experiences and so much fun and this and that. And like work goes from my first priority to like my third priority. Now I couldn't do this in 2017 because I didn't have the team and I didn't have enough time in the trenches and this and that. But my team even knows this, that the first 6 months a year, I'm the hardest working on the team. And for 3 months a year, I'm the least hardworking in the team. And then usually the last 3 months a year is kind of like a transitionary phase where, it's a little bit more of what people would call balance. And, that's just what works for me. And, I wish that wasn't the case. I wish I could be a lot more balanced, but yeah, I enjoy it.
It is balance in a way.
Yeah.
You're balancing out the hungriness and the laziness, but I think they both serve in some respect. You said something really interesting about how you look at your body versus how you look at your business. Mm-hmm. So you were talking about how you look at your body is like you have nothing to prove, but with your business, you feel like there's something to prove, and how it's a benefit when you have nothing to prove because it frees up mental space and it just feels better internally. Mm. So I don't know when you said that, so it might not be true anymore, but if it is, talk to me about how you broke that down and realized that.
No, 100%. And once again, you quite clearly you've done your research, but I said that once, or actually quite recently, in regards to like when I go to the gym, right? Like I don't look at myself in the mirror and I'm like, oh, you have what most people would consider like a very, very good physique. And that makes you this, and that says something about you. It's just like, I look, and I don't go to the gym because I'm like, I have to get to this physique. And once I get to this physique, or like, if I get to this physique, like it will, if it doesn't really like there's nothing about my physique that makes me feel more self-importance. And I'm very happy that I've gotten to that stage. And I compare that to like my business, because although I've had incredible success and I've had, I said I never need to work again and this and that, I'm just being honest, like it still doesn't feel like enough. I in that area of my life, I still don't feel like I'm enough, right? And quite clearly that's an insecurity of mine, and it's something I need to work on. And it's very interesting to me, as I said, because it's like for people, obviously their finances is very important, but like, you know, most guys, if they could have like, most guys would fucking kill to have like the sort of body I have. And by the way, like I will say also 90% credit to my Russian genetics. Like, you know, I'm very lucky in that. Like, honestly, like I you know, I will say it's not all work and stuff like that. You know, if you look at my mom, like my mom is like 44 years old. I always joke that she's on the half a bottle of wine a day and a pack of cigarettes a day diet and like pastries and whatever she wants. And she literally has a 6-pack. So like, once again, like it's far from just, you know, my own work. But I said, I look at the way that I view that aspect of my life and like the way that I view my business. And like, as I said, I don't feel like my business, I need to do it for anyone else or anything like that, but it's still, I don't feel necessarily like enough. And
what work could you do to feel enough? Like what do you actually do in practicality to feel secure in yourself for the stuff you've done?
I don't know, man. I mean, I think it's just something that will come with time, honestly. And maybe, you know, in the same way that I started training very like seriously when I was 14, you know, and you know, it's not something that really like I think about, or it's not something where I really place any self-importance on. I think maybe that same thing happened with my career, because in the same way, like in 2019, I was very different to the way I am now in 2021. Like I guess I'm very different to the way I am now in 2022. And like I'm a lot less, I take a lot less pride or a lot less self-importance on my like career and my work and this and that. And like, I also, I feel like I'm a lot more humble now than I was at 19. Like at 19, I felt like a godsend. Whereas now at 22, I'm like, man, 50% of it was just fucking luck and timing. And like, you know, so, and even like the way that like, I don't know, I dress and like the way that I act with people I don't know. Like, for example, like, you know, these days, I'll be honest, if I don't know you, like I don't ever tell people what I do. Like most of the time I just make up something like I'm in the avocado business or stuff like that. Like I'm very like, you know, I just very like downplay everything in my life, with you know, with people who don't know anything about me or that I just meet, et cetera, et cetera. So I think in the same way, hopefully, you know, in 4 years, I don't have this. And I will say as well, the other thing is a lot of it is environment. Like, I'll be honest, I just a genuine like respect for what you're doing and just doing it for the love of, like, I love my work, but there's also levels to it. Like, or there's periods where I love it more for really what it is, and then periods where I love it more for what it provides. And like, that's why I'm infatuated with, for example, Cape Town. Like, when I feel energy like quite a lot. And like, you know, I moved to Dubai, you know, like before this, I lived in London, you know, for 17 years. And in London and Dubai, like, you know, it can be quite, you know, a lot of people say a lot of times of like, oh, to be successful, you need to be around a lot of wealth. I don't believe that's true, like, at all. Like, I make the most, I make the most amount of money technically, although I probably usually see it a few months later, you know, actually, like show up in the businesses. But like, I make my most progress when I'm around the least amount of money. Like when I'm in a place like Cape Town, because it's just like everything gets stripped away, and you know, everything just returns to like a love of the craft. And the issue is sometimes being in places like London, Dubai, no matter how wise I am and how many times I learn these lessons, there's still always that thing of like, you know, you look at it and like, dude, like I look outside my window right now. I look outside my window right now. There's $20-30 million plus yachts, like within, I saw, you know, like out on the water.
This is Dubai.
Yeah. In Dubai. Right. And then it's like, no matter like how, it doesn't matter that I made $10 million last year. There's still always that aspect of like, I can't afford that yacht, right? And it's like, and by the way, I think if you surround yourself in that environment, I think it never goes away. I think no matter how wise you are, it never goes away. And I think that's why, like, for example, when I have a wife and I raise my kids, I won't raise them in a large city. Like I think no matter how wise you are 70% of your environment around you. If your environment around you, sort of attracts that and brings that out in people, I think you have no luck. So luckily, I think I'm wise enough to kind of understand that, and that's why I like to spend a lot of my time or a lot of the year in Cape Town, because I think it just brings me back to a love of the craft. Because I love the work as much as I do here, as much as I in Cape Town as I do here. But here, there's but look, this is what the work brings you as well, and it adds in an extra element.
Yeah. Are you familiar with Paul Graham?
No.
So Paul Graham, he's a venture capitalist in the U.S., and he's got this great statement or framing that I think about constantly that you just touched on, which is that every city whispers something to you. If you go to New York, it says make more money. If you go to LA, it says be more famous. If you go to San Francisco, it says be more impactful in the world. If you go to Harvard, it says, be smarter. And so Paul Graham, just a wise guy, making the same observation you just did, which is just that every city whispers to you. And it's fascinating to see how it play out. And you can't really, what does Cape Town whisper to you?
I don't know. For me, it's like, for me, Cape Town's a city that actually kind of reminds me a little bit of like LA, in like the clout perspective. Like it's there. It's it definitely is a little bit about the clout and social media and this and that on 1/10 of the scale. But luckily, Cape Town's also a place where I really just go to escape. Like I just got a new 6-bedroom villa there. Beautiful 6-bedroom villa, gym in my house, sauna, jacuzzi, everything that I could want. And I'm calling it the monastery, cause that's, really like my headspace when I go there. So, I will say for me personally, like when I land in Cape Town, like instantly there's just I just feel good. And there's certain places in the world where you just like Iceland's one of them. Like I just feel really happy there, man, like for no reason. And like, I feel very grounded. Right? And there's places in the world where you feel very frazzled, like New York, like Dubai, like London. Funny enough, I actually feel quite calm. Like London can be both. Like London to me can be Jekyll and Hyde, where I can feel super grounded there, but I can also feel very there's a lot of a lot of temptation, a lot of things to do, and a lot of wealth, and a lot of you'll just be going for a walk and you see this thing and you're like, oh, that looks nice, and you get dragged into a different mental thing. So yeah, for me personally, I just love Cape Town because it's very, if you kind of say to yourself, it's just a very peaceful, it's just a very peaceful place for me.
Yeah. We spoke about playing a lot of different games, playing the money game, playing the spirituality game, playing the health game. I'm curious, what game are you currently playing?
I'd say that definitely the big focus now is definitely the money game for the rest of the year. I'm trying to, maybe this is the first time publicly announcing this, but basically I am trying to get to 20 million by the end of the year, 20 million net after tax. So basically double what I have right now. And yeah, after that, I made the decision after this year that I'm going to semi-retire. I'm going into semi-retirement for 10, 15 years. So basically what that means is I'm only going to let myself work 20 hours a week. And, the reason that is because everyone has this idea of in my 40s, 50s, the dream is to retire. And when you're 40s, 50s, you can't actually do that much. And I'll be honest, chilling isn't fun. No matter who you are. I get it. I'm a very ambitious, driven person, but I want to semi-retirement because I'm in this unique position at the age of 22 where, instead, I think with very high likeliness, I'll have $20 million, at the end of this year, and that can yield, if you do things right, it can yield, anywhere from $2 to $3 million a year in cash flow. And with that, I can really live my life, and that doesn't mean I'm not shutting down my business at all. It's just, once again, as well, I've started to realize, even recently in the last month or so, I'm like, wow, there's nothing I need to do anymore. It's insane. Cause I've hired people who are better than me in all these departments in every aspect of the business. So I still fully intend on scaling my businesses, growing my businesses, but just being disciplined myself that I'm only allowed to work 20 hours a week. Another 20 hours are, and also the other thing is I've cultivated a team where in my companies, people have a percentage of profit share when they've been in the company long enough. So they're just as incentivized to grow it as I am. And yeah, in the other 20 hours a week or however many hours a week when I'm not working, I intend on getting really proficient at skiing and going to Buenos Aires and learning how to tango and learning how to cook and like climbing Everest and like doing all these things. Whereas for me, it's just like, I know I'm going to be a billionaire. Like it's not in the same way, like I knew I was going to, I knew I was going to get to 10 million after tax. Like I knew I was going to do it. I just thought I'd do it probably closer to like 30, not 21. So like I knew all these things were going to happen. So I know I'm going to hit 1 billion. And for me, when I get married, I want to kind of get married and have kids probably like late 30s, maybe when I'm 40. Like for me, when I'm married, like, dude, all I'm going to do is hang out with my kids, hang out with my wife, and build businesses. Like, cause I actually really love it. And up until my deathbed, like I'm still going to be in the world of business. Like I actually really love this stuff. Like building is really fun. It's just, as I said, like I would, for me, like I'm in such a cool position, like, and I'm a cool position where I don't have to drop things. Like they can still grow, but as I said, I can collect all these memories and stuff like that. And I think that's such an awesome thing to be able to do. So that's right now for the rest of the year, I'm in the money making phase.
I love it, man. It's like Drake said, 25 sitting on 25 mil is what you're hopefully going to surpass and make your own lyric. But before I let you go, I'm curious if you have any final pieces of parting wisdom for the people. We'll put all your socials below and everything like that, but just any final pieces of parting wisdom.
Let's see. I think we've talked about some pretty interesting things about like the whole stacking, like just stacking skills as much as you can, and that's really what makes you, that's really what makes you a force to be reckoned with when you look back, or when you look back 5 years, 10 years from now. So that stuff, and I'd say, I don't know, outside of that, man, it's like, outside of that, just do a lot of the inner work. Like I'd say that's the big thing, is do a lot of the inner work and try to do it as early on as possible. Because like the same revelations that like I have to this day of like, like most billionaires won't even look at themselves and be like, I'm still not happy with 1 billion. I want 2 billion because fundamentally I don't think I'm enough. And it's like, dude, I guess a lot of that stuff comes from like a very difficult childhood, very, very difficult childhood. So it's like, I haven't fixed it, but at least I've acknowledged it, and like, I guess that's the first step. Like
fair,
and it's, as I said, I think that the sooner you do, you get into meditation, you do this work, like the better. And if you think it's not going to have any positive effect on your future and tangibly, like, trust me, like I've seen so many people shoot themselves in the foot because they don't have enough self-awareness. So like the sooner, as I said, you can start meditating, the sooner you can go for a walk and don't take your phone with you. Just like be alone with like the demons of your thoughts. Like I know it's not fun sometimes, but the sooner you can do that, the better.
Well, I couldn't agree more. And I see the inner work that you've done come out so clearly in this conversation on your YouTube channel as well. Recommend everyone check that out. Thank you, Iman, for taking the time. I really appreciate it.
And honestly, thank you. And this is probably the most well-prepared podcast I've ever done. Big hats off to you, dude. Very impressed.
Thank you.
All right.